Webinar started. The webinar is being recorded.
Great, thank you. Okay, Jonathan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Lee, a member of the Contra Costa County Bar Association Board of Directors. On behalf of the Contra Costa County Bar Association, I'd like to welcome you to the first keynote session of the 27th Annual MCLE Spectacular. We hope you've enjoyed this morning's programs. Today, we will hear from Attorney General Rob Bonta and Special Assistant Attorney General Damon Brown about California's new Racial Justice Bureau. Before we get started, though, I would like to introduce Case Text, who is sponsoring today's program.
As an attorney, I was spending countless hours and money on legal research, but now there's a better way. Using Lexis or Westlaw can cost your firm upwards of $500 a month, and frankly, they've become outdated. Case Text is a new platform that uses 3 unique tools to help you do your best research. Case Text Research works just like any other standard legal research engine, but also uniquely offers artificial intelligence technology to help you search easier, find better results, and it can even help you write the first draft of your brief. It's so easy. With new search technology called parallel search, you can type in a sentence or question and Case Text will immediately find on-point legal precedent. It's a concept-based search, so even if you don't type in exactly the right words, it'll still find the right result. With Kara AI, you can just drag and drop any document, like a complaint or a brief, and it will immediately go to work finding relevant research. And with Compose, you can even get the first draft of a brief or motion written, including case law specific to your jurisdiction in just a few clicks. The answer is simple. Save money and time with Case Text. Case closed.
Thank you, Case Text, for your sponsorship of this program and your continuing support of the Contra Costa County Bar Association and the MCLE Spectacular. So let's get started with our keynote program titled Tackling the Rise of Hate, how California's new Racial Justice Bureau aims to protect our diverse communities. With our distinguished speakers, the Honorable Attorney General Rob Bonta and Special Assistant Attorney General Damon Brown. Rob Bonta is the 34th Attorney General of the state of California, the first person of Filipino descent and the second Asian American to occupy the position. Prior to his appointment as Attorney General, he served as a member of California's State Assembly for the 18th District. Prior to serving in the Assembly, Attorney General Bonta worked as a Deputy City Attorney for the City and County of San Francisco, where he represented the city and county and its employees, and he fought to protect Californians from exploitation and racial profiling. We also welcome Damon Brown, a Special Assistant Attorney General, who serves as a legal and policy advisor on civil rights. Special Assistant Attorney General Brown has worked in some of the most prestigious private law firms in California in a range of civil matters, including labor and employment, class action litigation, and constitutional and civil rights litigation. And he most recently served as the city attorney for the city of Compton. As an aside, I first met Attorney General Bonta when we both served as deputy city attorneys for San Francisco, and I had regular occasion to observe his skillful, thoughtful, and compelling advocacy, and I heard the high compliments that he received from judicial officers, including those who were not generally known for dispensing favorable reviews. Rob's colleagues admired and respected him not only for his advocacy, but also for his commitment to justice. It is an honor to welcome him and hear about the Racial Justice Bureau he formed as Attorney General. At this time, I would like to hand the mic over to Attorney General Rob Bonta.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that very kind introduction. I really appreciate you. I just want to thank you for your friendship, your leadership, your incredible advocacy as an attorney and as an advocate for vulnerable communities. And you have been a great friend, and you, when we got a chance to work together, we're an incredible colleague, and I know you will be great at anything and everything you do next, including U.S. Attorney's Office is lucky to have you. You will be a great judge or anything else that you decide to do, and proud to call you a friend. And thank you again for that very kind introduction. And to everyone who's here with us today, welcome. I spent many an afternoon attending MCLE courses before, and I have to say it's refreshing to be on this side of the virtual lectern. And I'm honored to join you today. I'd like to thank the Contra Costa County Bar Association for the efforts this organization leads to empower attorneys to build thriving practices and professional networks, and to connect the community to valuable legal resources. So really appreciate your work, appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Today, as legal professionals from across the Bay Area, we come together to learn and to reaffirm our commitment to justice. Our commitment, it's needed more than ever as our state and our nation grapple with unprecedented challenges. We have seen this pandemic exacerbate and lay bare and reveal long-standing issues of inequity. We've witnessed a horrific rise of prejudice and of hate, and we've heard a call for change to our justice system because too many, particularly Black Americans and other people of color, have legitimate questions about whether impartial justice is being served. Our work as legal professionals has never been more vital. Our job to pursue justice through the law, never more needed. Serving as your Attorney General, it's the honor of my life, not because of the title, because of the ability to make a difference, to lift people up, to make a change, to right wrongs, and to address injustice. I see my role as the people's attorney, someone who stands up for those who've been wronged, someone who represents the interests of all Californians, especially those who continue to be overlooked and unseen, the voiceless, the vulnerable, the overlooked, the forgotten, the cast aside, the hurt, the harmed, and the abused. That's who I fight for. And these are values that I learned from my parents, who were fierce forces for fairness, who marched for civil rights in Selma and organized farm workers in California's heartland. When I was a young boy, my parents moved to the heart of the farm workers movement, a Central Valley town in the Tehachapi's named La Paz, near Bakersfield, a magical place. They were recruited to help Filipino and Latino farm workers advocate for better wages and for better working conditions, alongside Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez, and Philip Vera Cruz, iconic leaders that are such an important part of our legacy of justice in the state and in this nation. I only have a few memories from those days. I was very young, but most of all, what stuck with me were the lessons I learned about equality. In La Paz, it didn't matter if your dad was Cesar Chavez or if your dad was a migrant worker. It didn't matter if you were Filipino, Chicano, Black, or white. Everyone was there because of the mission. We all saw injustice in the world and we wanted to fix it. That's why I decided to become a public attorney, to fight for those who've been wronged. And right now, when it comes to that fight, we have our work cut out for us. During this pandemic, we've been forced to confront the realities of systemic inequality and racism in our nation. It's been more than a year since the murder of George Floyd, but we remain in the middle of a racial justice reckoning in this country. The call for change has been loud, it's been clear, and it will take sustained work by all of us to make that change a reality. To that end, that is why I established our new Racial Justice Bureau at the California Department of Justice. The Racial Justice Bureau exists to ensure that we're looking at new and ongoing matters across DOJ through the lens of racial and social justice. The Bureau brings new attorneys and a supervising deputy attorney general to our civil rights enforcement section to assist with ongoing work on a broad range of significant civil rights and constitutional matters, including working to address hate crimes on behalf of the state and all Californians. Among other things, the Bureau assists with our efforts, including fighting hate crimes and organizations, confronting implicit and explicit bias in policing, supporting law enforcement best practices, addressing campus climate issues, supporting the task force to study and develop reparation proposals. This list is not exhaustive, but it represents my desire to increase the focus on racial and social justice issues across DOJ's civil rights work and to support new and ongoing efforts to protect all Californians. Taking on hate will always be one of my top priorities as the people's attorney. Throughout California's history, too many of us, so many of us have felt the sting of hate and of discrimination. And right now, we're in a full-on crisis when it comes to hate violence against the Asian Pacific Islander community and too many other communities. It's going to take everyone working together to take on hate and address its toxic effects. That's why through the Racial Justice Bureau, our new CARE office, or Office of Community Awareness, Response, and Engagement, and all of DOJ, we are working with our partners at the local level across the state to support our diverse communities and help identify strategies for tackling hate in all its forms. Here's the bottom line. All of our communities deserve to be seen, to be valued, and to be protected. And with our combined efforts, I look forward to continuing to advance the cause of justice throughout our great state. Our communities feel so much pain right now, and this moment requires us to stand side by side with one another to identify solutions to work together. We're in a state of crisis, a full-on state of emergency, and when you're in a crisis and in a state of emergency, you rise up, you work together, you team up, and you unite. And in this work, I want us to be guided by the words that really resonate with me at this time, and that often guide me now and in the past and throughout this pandemic. Those words of Martin Luther King Jr. when he wrote from the Birmingham City Jail in 1963. He said, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." And those words resonate today for me because we are all in this together. We're gonna rise together or not at all. We're interlinked. We need each other. We're interdependent. Our fight will help you. Your actions will affect me. And so we need to do what is required in a crisis like this, and we need to support one another. We're at our best when we all work together. And across this virtual webinar and across California and the nation, we are all connected as we face the common threats and common challenges in our society. No matter your discipline, no matter what kind of law you practice, no matter your title, like the farm workers in La Paz, we all have a role to play in the fight for justice. As Attorney General, that is my mission every day. So I want to say thank you to each of you for the work you lead to support our communities, to advance the legal profession, and to realize justice for as many Californians as possible. I'm grateful to join you today, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
All right. Please feel free, if you have any questions, to put them in the chat. And we will ask the Attorney General. I can see we already have one comment saying, thanking you for establishing the Bureau and that it's needed and definitely appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, you can either use the chat on the site or the chat in Zoom, either way, with any questions you might have. All right, well, if we don't have any, then we can go on to the Special Assistant Attorney General, but oh, hold on, here we go. What specific situations is the Bureau presently addressing?
Well, thank you. We are the Racial Justice Bureau. I created that in my second week in office, and the large focus at the time was on hate crimes. But we were then and are now in the middle of a racial justice reckoning, and I wanted to plant a flag in the ground that said we're going to see structural and systemic racism. We're going to fight against it. We're going to call it out and fight for more racial justice throughout the state in whatever its forms are. Certainly at the time and still now, hate crimes, hate violence, hate incidents, a top priority. So we're focusing on fighting back against the forces of hate, including investigating organizations that are organized around hate, and including white supremacist organizations. We are addressing implicit and explicit bias in policing. We are supporting law enforcement best practices when it comes to investigating or identifying hate crimes, setting up hate crime units that work with impacted communities in our DA's offices. We're sharing information about the rise in hate, including the 107% rise in hate crimes against the API community and the 31% increase statewide when it comes to hate. We're working on campus climate issues to make sure that we're pushing back against bullying based on identity and a protected class in our schools, to make sure our students, our young people are safe physically and safe emotionally. And then one thing that we're working on is specifically with respect to long-standing historical racial injustice is we provide technical and legal support to the task force to study and develop reparation proposals. They were created by a bill that I supported when I was still a legislator called Assembly Bill 3121, and they are identifying ways to provide reparations here in the state of California when it comes to addressing the original sin, the dark stain in our history of slavery in the United States. So those are some of the areas that we're working on, but we're also very nimble and flexible when it comes to racial injustice. It can come in many forms and unfortunately happens in many places and spaces. So we will rise to the challenge, whatever that challenge may be.
Wonderful. Thank you. A few more questions. As you may know, there's a movement afoot to change the name of Hastings Law School because its namesake and founder was involved in the systemic killing and removal of Indigenous peoples. Will this bureau take on an active role in this?
Let me just back up and say it is important what we celebrate and what we lift up, and the names, values, people that we honor, either through statues or symbols or other icons, including names. And it's important to recognize our history, and you need to face the problem to fix the problem. So I think it's the right dialogue and discussion to be having. We usually get involved when there's a issue of legal enforcement. I'm moving, as I move from the legislature to the executive branch, my role is no longer, creating laws or abolishing laws that have unintended impacts or maybe even intended impacts that hurt people. I'm now implementing, enforcing the laws of the state of California. So the renaming wouldn't necessarily fit within that specific mission. But we want to be. I always say I want to fix the problem, even if my role might not be specifically designed. Using my official capacity, there's other ways where I can be helpful and other ways I can assist. So the fight against racial injustice in all its forms is something that's important to me. It's always been part of who I am as an elected official, as a person, as a leader. It's personal to me, and I'm certainly supportive of making sure that the names that we put on buildings, places, the icons that we lift up for celebration and for acknowledgement are ones that are consistent with who we are, what our values are as a people and as a state.
Wonderful. When should people report to the Bureau versus to local agencies?
We can always receive reports to our Racial Justice Bureau. We want that line of communication. We want folks to know that as the people's attorney, we're here for the people. And if there's an issue that you have, share it with us. And if we're the right place, then we'll work on it. If there's someone else that is better suited or better fitted, we'll get you there. We'll get you to through a warm handoff to the right people that can assist you with your problem. I know that government can often be a maze to everyday people and don't understand who has what jurisdiction or who does what, and that's not your duty or your responsibility. So come to us. You can come to the Racial Justice Bureau. You can come to CARE, which is our, as I mentioned, community awareness, response, and engagement group that works with and for community members to make sure that community is aware of all the resources and support that we provide to defend consumer rights, constitutional rights, civil rights of the people of California. So it's not your duty to know exactly who to reach out to. If you have any questions, reach out to us and we'll help if we can. If not, we'll find you the right place.
That's fantastic. Okay. Will there be committees for laypersons to join to help knit our state together in terms of social justice?
There are a lot of different places, committees to get involved at different levels of government. In just specifically for the DOJ and for me, there are a number of committees where I have appointment authority. The FPPC is one, that's an attorney role. And there's a privacy committee as well that was designed by California's new privacy laws and some other places. There's also the reparations task force that I mentioned that's looking at the issue of what type of reparations might be appropriate to provide. I think the governor appoints people to that task force while we provided the DOJ that legal and administrative support that I mentioned. So at the spirit of your question is, how can I get involved, which I appreciate. So I think you might find something at your city, at your county. There could be something at the state level, whether it's something that I have authority over for appointing, or whether it's the many, many more state commissions that the governor appoints. I think there's always a place to get involved. So if you would like to follow up with us, we can help guide you through that maze and see what a good fit might be for you and your interests and your passions.
All right. And you can also check out your local bar association too, to see what they can do. So how has the Racial Justice Bureau been received, particularly in agricultural and rural parts of California?
It's been received very well, generally. It's been received with excitement and positivity because folks, I think, really believe that this moment, believe what I believe, that this moment requires us to call out racial injustice in all its forms, and it requires us to call it out, yes, and also take action. And it's important to have the values. It's important to follow up with real change and real reform. And I think people want to see and are pleased to see. Our feedback has been their government understanding the requirements of this moment and rising to meet the moment. And so it's been received very well. And I haven't heard any criticisms of it up to this point, whether it be urban or rural or inland or coastal or north or south or central. So so far so good, and we're excited about the work that we did. And even if someone didn't like it, I like it, and it's the right thing to do. So criticism comes with the territory, and I am very clear-eyed about the need for our Racial Justice Bureau. And critics I will listen to, and I'm always hoping to be a better leader and to deliver better services to the people of California. But I do not have any doubts about the wisdom and efficacy of the Racial Justice Bureau.
Okay. Is there any particular focus on addressing hate crimes within underrepresented communities, such as the homeless?
Yes, we're looking at hate crimes against any and all communities that face it, that are suffering right now, that are hurting, that are frightened to do everyday things, to go on a run or run an errand, to go for a walk, to go to the store, to drop off their kids, because that's what many people feel right now. And they fear that they might be next. And that's not acceptable. It doesn't have to be that way. And so many people are being targeted because of who they are, where they're from, how they look, who they love, or how they pray. And for anyone and everyone who is suffering from the forces of hate, whether it be the Sikh community or the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the LGBTQ plus community, Asian American community, African American, Latino, or homeless community, we want to be there through our work to fight back against the forces of hate.
Wonderful. Will you be posting general metrics or statistics on reported hate crime incidents on the website?
We have that, and maybe my team can put something in the chat if it's readily accessible. If not, we can follow up at the appropriate time. But we do a hate crimes report every year. It's available online. That's where I was drawing some of those data points I was just sharing with you about the 107% increase in hate crimes against the API community, the 31% increase overall. And it's important for us to know the full scope, scale, dimension, contours of the problem before we can address it and take action. So we take our role in providing data and evidence and sharing it with our state very seriously. And we have that up, and it's posted now here in the chat. Edwin Salcedo gave you the link.
All right, great. And then it looks like I've got one last question about whether you'll be addressing hate crimes on social networking sites.
We'll be addressing hate crimes wherever and whenever they occur. I know they take many forms. Social networking sites and platforms are a place, unfortunately, where there are numerous challenges that we are concerned about. The peddling of misinformation that can be very dangerous, including hate incidents and the rise of hate. We of course have there's certain standards for what constitutes a hate crime. We also have to balance, of course, the First Amendment and free speech, and so there's some tricky balancing acts to do. But wherever hate incidents and hate crimes occur, we'll be interested, and where we can, where authority allows us, we'll be involved.
All right. Well, I just want to say another huge thank you to you, Attorney General Bonta, for taking time from your, I know, very, very busy schedule to speak to our members. I hope the rest of your day and your Thanksgiving holidays go well. And at this time, to tell us more about the new Racial Justice Bureau is Special Assistant Attorney General Damon Brown.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon.
Go. All right. All on you, Special Assistant Attorney General.
Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone who is attending this webinar. I'd like to follow up on some of the things that the Attorney General mentioned about the Racial Justice Bureau, to provide some additional information about the Bureau, what its purpose is, what some of the functions of the Bureau are to date, and also to provide you all with a little bit of data. I saw one of the questions that was asked previously about some of the hate crime statistics, which I will include in part of my presentation, but certainly in the chat, there is a direct link to the latest report on hate crime statistics, which is reported annually. And so the 2020 data is available on our website. So with that, I will begin by sharing my screen. I hope I do this correctly. Okay. So the topic for today was tackling the rise of hate and how California's new Racial Justice Bureau aims to protect our diverse communities. And I wanted to just start out by going over some of what Attorney General Bonta mentioned before on what the purpose of the Racial Justice Bureau is. In essence, the Racial Justice Bureau has been established to fortify the department's section which handles civil rights enforcement, and to allow it to focus on issues that really relate specifically to racial justice in all of its forms, whether it be in social spaces, systemic issues, and a lot of what we see happening in society that causes us to pause. Again, the first point, taking a stance and making sure that Californians understand that this issue is of critical importance to this Attorney General, as it is to everyone, and to make sure that we are doing this in conjunction with local communities. And so one of the things that the Attorney General started off by doing once he took office was to meet with the mayors of the 13 largest cities here in California, to bring together their elected leadership as well as community stakeholders to discuss what the issues are in local communities as it relates to racial violence and hate, to see what's working in those communities and to see what resources the Department of Justice may be able to bring to either those cities or to those community organizations to strengthen the efforts to combat hate wherever it may be. And so that has been a large focus at the beginning of the Racial Justice Bureau's work, to work with those local elected leaders and community stakeholders in combating hate. The Attorney General also mentioned that additional staff resources have been brought on and are being brought on in order to shore up the capacity that the Department of Justice has to take on a wider range of these significant matters, including hate crimes, but not limited to hate crimes, to make sure that civil rights and constitutional rights are protected. And again, the focus would be very narrow in terms of making sure that social justice and racial issues are prioritized by this group of attorneys and professionals. And this is just a quote that the Attorney General made at the time that he announced the Racial Justice Bureau back in May, shortly after he was appointed by Governor Newsom, that reaffirms his commitment to making sure that hate, wherever it exists, is routed out, and that we can work to eliminate the effects of bias and hate in our society. This is just a little information on hate crimes and some of the statutory authorities that talk about enforcement of these hate crime statutes. The Ralph Act, which is codified as Civil Code Section 51.7, defines who may have a right of action if they are victims of hate. And these are some of the enumerated categories. Recently, the last 3 categories were added: position in a labor dispute, primary language, because there is an increasing hostility towards those who speak different languages, unfortunately, as well as genetic information and identity, as those who express their gender identity are also finding themselves to be targets. These are examples. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are the primary ways in which we find these claims arise. And so the definition, because of, we look at the threshold for a hate crime, criminally, the bias motivation must be a substantial factor. Bias against those categories that were previously listed. And so in the criminal context, there must be a substantial factor. Civilly, there isn't a clearly defined threshold. One view, again, looks at the criminal standard and finds that to be a reliable standard in finding civil liability. And bias motivation can also be found as a motivating factor, which is a slightly lower threshold to find that there has been a crime because of someone's membership in one of those categories that was listed. There is a private right of action under this Civil Code Section 52 and 52.1, and the remedies that are available are listed here, including injunctive relief, equitable relief, damages, punitive damages, civil penalties, and attorney's fees. So one of the things that's important to understand, particularly about hate crimes, and I'm focusing a little bit on hate crimes because that has heretofore been one of the large focuses that the Bureau has had since its inception. Although, again, towards the end of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other areas in which the Bureau is active. But understanding what a hate crime is versus a hate crime event versus a hate incident. Here's a definition of a hate crime event. And so it can include a hate crime as defined by the Penal Code. It also can include multiple offense acts that include the bias motivations that because of substantially motivating factors that we talked about before. One hate crime report can include up to 10 offenses, and so it can be multiple offenses that are categorized as one event, including multiple victims and including multiple suspects. So as you're reading the report and you see the hate crime events, realize that you are looking at data that encompasses more than just one single event. It could encompass more than one single event. Here's the distinction between a hate crime and a hate incident. Obviously, the threshold of liability is higher for a hate crime, showing that you've been the victim or been targeted because of your actual or perceived disability, gender, nationality, race or ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or association with a group or a person with one of these characteristics. And hate crimes come with the penalty of imprisonment or jail time. Hate incidents are really more actions or behavior that motivated the hate, the way in which the hate manifests itself, but don't always rise to the level of being crimes. And so that's where you'll find name calling, insults, and posting other material that doesn't result in property damage or distributing hateful material in public places. And this is the area where the Attorney General mentioned earlier. There are some, First Amendment concerns, and that is again why they are identified as hate incidents and not crimes. This is the annual report that the Attorney General mentioned. The hate crime in California provides statistics for the reporting year, which again, the available information that we have now is for 2020. It lists hate crime events, offenses, victims, and they break them down in the categories that are listed here in the bulleted items. You can find the information by county as prosecuting agencies report their data, and looking at the filings and the referrals and the dispositions, they're all broken down in that fashion. One of the other helpful parts of the report is to show the different trends, and we'll go through some of those trends now that show, the direction that hate has taken in the state. And one of the areas where the Attorney General mentioned is Asian Pacific Islander are experiencing an extreme increase in hate incidents, in hate crimes being reported, and hate crime events as well. The numbers have fluctuated over the last 10 years. Overall, hate crime events have increased. We see about a 25% increase over the last 10 years, with the lowest year having been reported in 2014. We see an increase just between 2019 and 2020 of 31% of hate crime events, and then hate crime offenses have also increased over that same period of time by almost 24%. We also see the number of victims that are reporting hate crimes have increased by 23.2%. That's sort of a double-edged sword. In one respect, of course, we are not pleased with the fact that the number of victims has increased, but we certainly are encouraged that the reporting is going up. And I'll talk a little bit about how hate crimes are reported and how we are encouraging local governments and communities to have outreach to inform their residents about how they can report hate crimes so that law enforcement can do what it needs to do, and so resources can also be made available to those who have become the victims of hate. The number of suspects reported, again, it parallels slightly the increase in the victims who are reporting the hate crimes as well. We've seen that hate crime events that involve racial bias has increased 67.3% over the last year. Again, that's a huge increase. Anti-Black bias events have risen by 87%. Anti-Hispanic or Latino events have increased by 38%. And anti-Asian bias events have increased 89 from 43 to 89%, or I'm sorry, 43 to 89 events in 2020. Anti-white bias events have also increased from 39 to 82. So we see across the board hate crimes against almost all categories of ethnicities within our state have increased significantly. We also see religious bias, an overall decrease in religious bias from 2019 to 2020. We saw that anti-Jewish bias events fell by 18.4%, and that anti-Islamic bias has fallen from 25 to 15. Again, there have not been any analyses as to what the cause of that has been, but again, these are still religious hate crimes is still a significant area of concern and cause for the work that's being done to continue. Involving sexual orientation, we've seen a decrease of 12%. We've seen anti-gay male events fall by 5.8%, and anti-homosexual bias events fall from 35 to 21 over the 1 year period of time. Gender bias has increased and almost by a significant margin. Anti-transgender bias has increased and almost doubled in the past year. Hate crime offenses have increased overall. And again, those are the actual hate crimes for which there are criminal penalties. Those have increased by almost 24%. Violent crime offenses have increased almost 26%. And property crime offenses have increased by 20% over the last year. The reported anti-Asian crime events, again, this could be a collection of events and multiple victims and individuals, that has increased by 107% in 2020 and went from 43 to 89. The number of reported anti-Asian property hate crimes, where we've seen destruction of property through arson, burglary, or vandalism, that increased by 55%. And then a number of reported anti-Asian violent hate crime events also increased by 125% over the 1 year period. So again, those are some of the statistics that are contained within the report, and that is available on our website. Again, the Racial Justice Bureau is targeting hate crimes, but it is also open to looking into other issues. And so we talked about hate crimes and organizations where white supremacy is being promoted, and looking to increase the guidance that we give to law enforcement on how to address those crimes within their communities. We also are looking at explicit bias and implicit bias in policing. The Attorney General is committed to issuing guidance and training to law enforcement agencies throughout the state, and will support as necessary investigations into law enforcement abuses in communities, and working collaboratively with law enforcement and communities to try to strengthen and reunite the bonds of trust that in many areas have been broken. As I stated, issuing law enforcement bulletins is a standard practice that the Attorney General's office engages in, and will continue to issue guidance to prosecutors and public agencies regarding a lot of these challenges that we face in policing in our communities and trying to ensure the public safety while also respecting and honoring everyone's constitutional rights that they're afforded. We're also dealing with campus climate issues, looking at discriminatory policies and how Black and Brown children There are studies that have proven there are disparities in discipline amongst children of color in schools, how schools are handling discipline through law enforcement means, which our office finds to be problematic in several ways, and making sure that we are able to help and work with educators and community leaders to find ways to strengthen all of the wonderful, diverse, academic environments that we have, and make sure that people are treated equitably and inclusively on their campuses. And then lastly, the task force, which the Attorney General referenced earlier. AB 3121 was a bill that was brought forth by then Assembly Member Dr. Shirley Weber, who now serves as our Secretary of State. And that was to develop a task force tasked with the responsibility of in researching the issue of reparations and coming up with proposals that would address and redress the systemic economic and social ills that have befallen those descendants of African slaves here in our state. And so that task force is up and running. It meets actually next month is its next meeting. Their meetings are public, and so I would encourage everyone who has an interest to participate virtually and see the testimony that is being brought forth by various people in different sectors and different industries. And once this report is finalized in July of next year, further action will be taken. So the Department of Justice, through the Racial Justice Bureau, provides the administrative, the legal, and the technical support to the task force in order for it to do its work. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Great, thank you, Special Assistant Attorney General Brown. We do have a few questions. First one is, will your task force try and identify those online that threaten violent hate and bring civil and criminal actions against them?
So to the extent, again, we are working very closely with local law enforcement agencies and would, as appropriate, utilize the resources of the office. We understand that online and cyber bullying is a big issue. We understand that a lot of hate groups have used online forums and platforms in order to organize and to carry out acts of hate. And so various sections within the Department of Justice work with the appropriate federal and local authorities when allegations or information about this online activity finds its way to our attention.
Okay, great. To what extent is there evidence that the profusion of hate crimes increased during the 2016 election campaign and during the last administration?
So there are studies being done to try to find if there is, if there is any nexus to what was just referenced in terms of the political tenor and some of the actions and conduct of not only the administration, but also trends and the impact that COVID-19 has had as well. That data is not currently available, but I anticipate there being some of these studies concluding and being able to present their findings relatively soon.
Okay, well, that will be very interesting to learn about. Can you provide examples of how a substantial factor can be identified? So in terms of the substantial factor test and the motivating factor test, it's similar to if we're looking at it in another context, which many may be familiar in the employment context, looking at the conduct, we talked about the hate incidents and how some of that, while it may not rise to the level of being a hate crime, but certainly to the extent that anyone is involved in any hate incidents that are connected
to violence, destruction of property, the things that would rise to the level of crimes, those would serve as substantially motivating factors in the actual crime that was committed. And so the significance, the quantity, all of that, that would go into an assessment of whether it would be motivating or substantially motivating would support the evidence that would be needed in order to establish that the crime was committed.
All right, thank you. Has the Bureau found that the rise in hate incidents is also qualitatively more severe? Thinking of the daylight attacks on AAPI seniors, for example, but not sure if the data kind of shows this more broadly.
I'm not clear on that. I have not looked at it from that perspective. I do know that in terms of some of the information that is coming in, and certainly anecdotally, as many of us have seen, it does appear that a lot of the hate crimes that are being committed are being done openly and publicly, and almost, presumably with the intention of being known and attributed to individuals. So, we certainly saw that with some of the attacks on the synagogues. We've seen that on the API, attacks, as were mentioned, a lot of these, attacks that have happened on the BART with seniors. These are all things where the perpetrators of the crimes are readily identified. And so we are not, at this time, I'm not aware of any connection that's quantifiable or that can qualitatively be assessed. But certainly, I'm sure that information will be part of some of the trends that come out in the next report that covers 2020 through 2021.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I don't have any other questions for the moment, but I'll give it a 30 seconds to give people an opportunity. And I did want to let everybody know that the links that had been put in the chat earlier, along with the contact information for Edwin Saucedo, have been added to the materials for this program. So you'll have that information as well. And can definitely follow up with Edwin about any questions that you have about the Racial Justice Bureau. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So thank you again, Special Assistant Attorney General Brown. That was wonderful for us to learn so in depth about a bit of our history, where things have been, where they're trending, and what we're going to be doing about making things better. So
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you for our, we have our wellness forum at 2:00 today. And then we start again at 9:00 tomorrow morning. So looking forward to seeing everybody. Thank you.